Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me on another Lightroom video tutorial. Today I just wanted to show you the steps that I went through or that I followed when I developed this image, Light Trail Hudson Valley, that goes along with my blog post about it, the photojournal blog post. And I think that just showing you the steps that I took, but also more importantly, I think what I was thinking about when I went through the steps, I think is probably the best way to give you a sense of the process of developing, and hopefully that can help you in your own work, in your own developing of images in Lightroom. This is obviously the final version. The original is this one here. Okay, so this is the original capture, and the first thing you notice right away, of course, is how much brighter it is. And the main reason for that is because, as anyone who's taken one of my workshops knows, I always talk about exposing to the right and trying to move that histogram more to the right without clipping, of course. That helps with shadows and eliminating noise. In essence, you're taking advantage of the cleaner and higher quality part of the sensor. And so you can see here, my histogram here on the right hand side, I've moved as much as I can without any clipping. I probably could have gone a little further, to be honest, because I was probably going to clip this highlight area over here, and there's not much detail there. But you know, now we're sort of splitting hairs, and that's not what I'm trying to advocate here. I'm just trying to advocate an overall method of making sure that you're really capturing as much data as possible on the sensor. Now, when you do that, the image looks too bright, and a lot of photographers are put off by that initially. They feel that, well, it doesn't look right, so I must be overexposing. But no, in fact, again, the histogram is the key. So when you look at my final version, you can see here in the basic panel, I've pulled down the exposure by almost a full stop, and that's how you get the image to look the way you want it to look. In other words, to look more how it looked when you actually made the capture. And so for me, that's exactly what happened here. I've pulled it down almost a full stop, and this is more the feel and the look that the scene had, that the moment had, and it really preserves more of how I want to convey the image. So that's the first thing here. I actually kept the white balance setting pretty much spot on to a daylight white balance. It's 5100. And that's kind of the mood that the image had. It wasn't particularly warm, except for just a little bit of light that was coming through here and hitting these leaves. But even that light wasn't a warm light. It was diffused through a lot of fog. And so I wanted to kind of mix or blend the subtle warmness of the green leaves with the overall coolness of the image, especially in the fog here. So as I mentioned, I've pulled down the exposure. I've pushed up the contrast, plus 15, just to give the image a little bit of depth in the shadows and the highlights. I pulled down the highlights here just a bit. I was probably experimenting and really didn't zero it out, but even if I zeroed it out here at 0, it was at -4. There's not much of a difference there. I pushed up the shadows just a bit to open up probably these areas in here. I also pushed up the whites just a bit to give a little bit more, again, a little bit more dynamic range. And I pulled on the blacks to -15 for depth, for mood, to create that richness that I think the image needs. Clarity is set at 0, and the reason for that is because while I tend to add or use clarity on most of my images, it has a nice way of bringing out local details. Clarity is local contrast. In this case, I think it has the opposite effect, and it takes away from the softer, more ephemeral feel and look that I'm trying to achieve in this image. And so I think that it just works better without it, and so no clarity needed in this case. Vibrance, plus 26, saturation is plus 5. These are kind of standard. I usually like to add more vibrance and saturation. Vibrance just gives you a lot nicer color, more of an organic saturation. Again, it saturates things that are less saturated to begin with. In detail, I have gone a little bit further with the noise reduction. Again, this image was shot at ISO 800 because there was quite a breeze on this particular morning, and I was just afraid that I would incur some blur. And there is some slight blur in some of the leaves, but even at ISO 800, the best I could do was a 1/30th of a second. And so I just felt that anything lower than a 1/30th would really have had a detrimental effect in terms of keeping the leaves as sharp as possible, all the vegetation here. So I'm using a little bit more noise reduction than I would normally like to use, around 35 in luminance and 28 in color, and that's pretty good for me. Again, there's a lot of detail in this image, and so noise is not going to be something that is very apparent. It would be more apparent in an image that had, let's say, a large area of sky or clouds or a lot of reflection in water. And here you're going to be hard pressed to find noise unless you make a really large print. So I don't have to go that aggressive, but enough to get rid of some of the basic noise. And then the final step is local adjustments, which I'm a big proponent of, leading the eye through the image. I think that's the key thing. And for me, mostly I like to accomplish that with dodging and burning. So you can see here, I have two masks or two adjustments. This brush here is a burning brush, so that's darkening these areas. So I wanted to sort of darken the bottom here, bring the eye up to the vegetation, and also wanted to darken this bank here along this trail because again, I think that helps to highlight the rocks here that lead up to this other highlight in the image, this other focal point in the image. And so just darkening down this area here, I think, helps with that. And this is just a basic brush set at minus 0.50, so half stop. And then the other brush here is a dodging brush, and this brush, I just used it to pick out some highlights, to sort of highlight some areas of the image that I thought were important. The ferns down here, just to give them a little more brightness, to make them stand out a little bit more. And also this area here and some of these leaves up here, to give it a more of a continuous kind of light, a consistent kind of light, a uniform kind of light. And I thought that would help to kind of strengthen the whole image from top to bottom. So you can see how I'm always trying to think compositionally when I'm processing images in Lightroom, because it's the composition that I want to affect. It's the composition that I want to make as strong as possible. And so my adjustments are going to be in service of the composition. The stronger I can make the composition, the better I can lead the eye through the image to the areas that I think are most important and keep interest for the viewer. Then it makes it more effective in conveying to the viewer what the image is about without them getting stuck in either technicalities or inconsistencies in the image or things about the composition that feel disjointed. The more direct you can make the message for the viewer through all of the things that I've mentioned here, then the better chance you have of making a successful photograph. All right, hope that helps. Thanks very much for watching, and see you in the next one.